Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Thursday, January 1st, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. Expect a high of 58.7 degrees in Riverside today, with a low dipping to 56.1 degrees. Perfect for a crisp start to the new year. Happy New Year's Day. Coming up, we'll explore the factors driving the doubling of Affordable Care Act premiums for millions of Americans and break down California's push for top AI companies to develop emergency response strategies. Plus, we'll touch on other key developments from around the world. All this and more on Alex's News. Stay tuned. It's the first morning of the new year, and a major change just hit American healthcare. The Enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies expired at midnight, and millions are bracing for higher bills. Reporter Ethan is here to break it down. Ethan, what changed overnight?
The temporary pandemic-era boosts to the ACA's premium tax credits vanished when the clock struck midnight. Those enhancements, first added in the American Rescue Plan and then extended through the Inflation Reduction Act, kept premiums capped and eliminated what folks called the subsidy cliff. Now, we're back to the older rules, where help phases out around 400% of the federal poverty level, and premiums can take a much larger bite of household income.
How many people are affected right now?
ABC News says the enhanced credits were helping roughly 22 million of the roughly 24 million marketplace enrollees. With those extra dollars gone, most of those families will see premiums jump, some dramatically. Kaiser Family Foundation analyses, cited by ABC and Forbes, estimate average out-of-pocket premiums could more than double this year.
When you say double, what are we talking about in dollars?
KFF's projection has the average subsidized buyer going from about $888 a year in 2025 to about $1,904 in 2026. For older consumers or those just over the income cutoff, it can be much worse. The Congressional Budget Office expects gross premiums to keep rising over the next 2 years, so the pain doesn't stop today. The Washington Post has noted that even small changes in the risk pool can amplify those increases.
Give us a real face on this. Who's feeling it today?
ABC's Good Morning America spoke with an Illinois family, Doug and Shadeen Butchart, who are dealing with ALS in the family. Their monthly bill is set to clear $2,000 in the new year, so they're switching plans and tapping savings they hoped would last for years. Doug said, quote, "We're going to have to figure it out," end quote, and he worried the hikes could, quote, "endanger lives," end quote.
And there were similar stories elsewhere, right?
The Chicago Tribune profiled an Indiana couple watching their annual costs jump from roughly $9,100 to more than $23,400. That is a $14,300 swing in a single year. They, like many people, are looking at skinnier plans with higher deductibles and worrying about gaps in coverage for the care they actually need.
Let's step back. Remind us what the old rules were before these pandemic enhancements.
Before the ARP and the IRA, subsidies ended around 400% of the poverty line, which means roughly $62,600 for an individual and about $128,600 for a family of 4 in 2026. Hit $1 over that and you were on your own, which is why people called it a cliff. The temporary boost flattened that cliff by capping premiums at 8.5% of income for everyone and making silver plans free for the lowest earners. That cap is gone today, and the required contribution for people just under the cutoff can jump toward roughly 9.8%.
Some experts warned of a death spiral in the risk pool. Is that happening?
Not today, but the ingredients are there. When healthier people bow out or drop to bare-bones bronze plans, the average costs for those who remain can rise, which pushes more healthy folks away, and on it goes. Becker's Payer Review and Al Jazeera both highlighted those warnings late last year, and the Urban Institute, along with the CBO, projects millions could drop coverage in 2026 if Congress does nothing. The danger is real, though states stepping in have softened the blow in some places.
Let's talk politics. How did Washington let this lapse?
A grinding budget fight and the longest shutdown on record last fall set the tone, as ABC News and Fox News both recounted. Republicans argued the pandemic-era boosts were too costly to make permanent, with some citing a 10-year price tag of roughly $335 billion. Democrats pushed for an extension, but December ended with dueling Senate bills going nowhere. The Texas Tribune and Reuters both noted that the big summer tax package, cheekily dubbed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, left the subsidy extension out entirely.
What are the parties saying now that the deadline passed?
Some Republicans acknowledged the shock. On Fox News, Senator Josh Hawley said premiums could go up, quote, 2-3 times, end quote, even as he advocated different reforms. House Democratic leaders blasted the lapse as harmful to families, with Representative Catherine Clark posting on X that Republicans refuse to act. Meanwhile, the White House has favored savings account-style changes over reviving the credits, as CNN's political reporters have explained.
Is there any real path to relief in the near term?
There is movement, but it's uncertain. A House discharge petition, which is a parliamentary maneuver to force a vote, has enough signatures to bring a 3-year extension bill to the floor in early January. CBS News and the Sacramento Bee also noted a bipartisan option that would do a shorter extension with tighter income caps and some anti-fraud guardrails. If anything passes quickly, officials could try to make help retroactive to today, much like they did in 2021.
How would that retroactive fix actually work for people who already paid January's bill?
The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services can run what's called a mass change, recalculating everyone's advance credits and sending updated files to insurers. Future bills would drop, past overpayments could be credited forward, and anything unresolved would wash out at tax time next year. Employment law firms and benefits consultants like Ogletree Deakins and WTW have laid out that playbook, including grace periods of up to 90 days and special enrollment windows to bring people back in.
We've heard early enrollment numbers don't look catastrophic. What do we know?
CMS reported about 15.6 million plan selections on the federal exchange by December 23rd, which is down a bit from last year. North Carolina Health News noted some of that dip is tied to a cleanup of fraudulent signups, which may have inflated prior totals. Returning customers actually ticked up, while new shoppers fell off, suggesting people who had coverage tried to hang on for now. But early in-force counts, meaning people who paid, are down double digits this first week.
Are auto renewals part of the problem?
They can be. Local public radio in California Central Valley, KVPR, and public media in New Mexico, KUNM, both flagged cases where people were pushed into renewals that made sense with the old subsidies but are unaffordable today. Some will only discover that when they see a new bill, which could prompt cancellations in the days ahead. That's why consumer groups are urging people to log in, update their applications, and shop again, even after New Year's Day.
You mentioned states stepping in. Who's doing what?
Colorado set aside $100 million for a short-term premium assistance program, and Connect for Health Colorado reported essentially flat enrollment as of mid-December. The Colorado Sun, republished by High Plains Public Radio, quoted the state exchange leader calling it encouraging, but warned cancellations could still come when bills hit. New Mexico used about $17 million from a state affordability fund to fully replace the federal boost, and state officials said they hit a record with more than 80,000 signups. California tapped its general fund to cushion lower-income shoppers, which covered California, and the American Medical Association said limited net hikes for those groups to the mid-teens, even as new signups sagged.
And what about places without those state dollars?
The contrast is stark. In states without offsets, enrollment declines are bigger, and the risk of coverage loss is higher. Georgetown University's Center for Children and Families points out that rural areas, often in states that didn't expand Medicaid, rely heavily on marketplace plans and could be hit the hardest. Without help, you'll likely see more people shift to high-deductible bronze plans or exit altogether.
Which brings us to hospitals. What are they bracing for?
Hospitals expect more uncompensated care, especially in emergency departments and community clinics. When bills go unpaid, providers often shift costs to privately insured patients, which can ripple into higher prices across the board. The American Medical Association has warned this kind of disruption leads to delayed care for chronic conditions, which is medically riskier and financially costlier. It's the kind of feedback loop health economists dread.
Do we have any sense of where the uninsured rate is heading?
The uninsured rate had been around 7.7%, which was a historic low according to ABC and federal data. Budget analysts at the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget warn it could edge back toward double digits by mid-year if Congress does not shore up the credits. CBO and Urban Institute projections of a few million people losing coverage line up with that trajectory. NPR has framed this as one of the largest pullbacks in social spending in years, with predictable fallout.
You mentioned fraud cleanup earlier. How big a factor is that in the numbers?
CMS officials and state partners have been purging suspicious applications, which may account for 1 to 2 million enrollments in prior seasons, according to coverage in North Carolina Health News. That means some of the year-over-year drop is actually noise rather than a true collapse in demand. But it also means the baseline is smaller just as people are confronting higher bills. So what looks like stability today could mask real attrition in February and March.
What should consumers do today if their premiums just skyrocketed?
First, log into healthcare.gov or your state marketplace and update your information, because some people still qualify for smaller federal credits under the old rules. Shop plans again, since a different network or a bronze plan might be cheaper, even if the deductible is higher. Check whether your state offers extra help this year. And if Congress passes a fix, you could see an automatic recalculation, so keep an eye on notices from your exchange and your insurer.
How fast could Congress act, realistically?
House leaders say a vote in early January is doable if the discharge petition holds. The Senate is trickier, with competing ideas about scope, duration, and whether to pair an extension with other priorities like health savings accounts. The New York Times has noted that even when a deal emerges, the details about retroactivity, income caps, and enforcement can take time to hammer out. So even a quick win might not show up on people's invoices until later in the month.
Are insurers prepared for all this back and forth?
They're used to it, but it's messy. Carriers can process updated enrollment files and apply new advance credits to future bills, yet January overpayments often get reconciled on the tax return the following year. Consultants at WTW describe this as a heavy administrative lift, especially with special enrollment windows and extended grace periods in play. The longer Congress waits, the more complicated those reversals become.
What about small businesses and the employer market? Any spillover there?
Indirectly, yes. If more people leave the individual market, providers may push for higher reimbursement from employer plans to offset uncompensated care. That can raise premiums for small employers at renewal time. CNN's Health Desk has covered similar dynamics in past pullbacks, and actuaries say we could see echoes of that by the fall.
Are there any bright spots in the data?
A few. Returning consumers are more likely to stick than first-timers, which suggests the marketplaces have some staying power even under stress. And in states that moved early, like Colorado and New Mexico, the worst-case enrollment drops haven't materialized yet. Still, those are islands in a choppy sea, not a sign the broader problem is solved.
How are advocates framing the stakes over the next few weeks?
They're arguing this is a test of whether the country keeps the coverage gains made since the pandemic. The New York Times and NPR both underline the equity risks, warning the pullback could widen racial and rural health gaps that had begun to narrow. Patient groups point to people with chronic illnesses, like the family ABC featured, saying a sudden price shock can lead to skipped medications or delayed visits. In their view, timing matters, which is why they're pushing for retroactive relief.
If a fix passes, could people who dropped coverage get back in?
Yes, and that will be key. CMS can authorize special enrollment periods for people who lost coverage or faced affordability changes, and marketplaces can outreach to those who recently canceled. Ogletree Deakins notes that a broad SEP paired with mass recalculations would pull many back. But there's always a lag, which is why some experts are urging quick action in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Is there any sign the White House would support a short extension?
The president has emphasized different policy tools like health savings accounts and deregulation more than subsidy extensions. But politically, a bipartisan short-term patch tied to other priorities is not off the table if pressure builds. Reuters has reported that the administration is watching the market data closely. A lot depends on what the Senate can agree to without blowing up the rest of the agenda.
Bottom line for families waking up today, worried and confused?
Do not ignore the envelope or the email. Update your marketplace application, compare plans again, and check your state's options because some have real money on the table. Keep receipts and statements in case Congress makes aid retroactive and you're due a credit. And remember, there's a strong chance the policy picture will shift again this month, so staying engaged could save you a lot.
Ethan, thanks for making sense of a complicated and emotional story on a very busy morning.
Thanks, Grace. I know it's a lot to absorb, but help can come together quickly, so people should keep checking in and asking questions.
California's new AI transparency law kicks in today, and it's a big one. Chloe, walk us through what changes right now.
Starting today, California's Senate Bill 53, the Transparency and Frontier Artificial Intelligence Act, requires the biggest AI makers to publish what amount to disaster plans. CalMatters describes it as a transparency-first strategy after last year's tougher bill stalled. Companies building the most advanced models have to spell out how they assess catastrophic risks, how they'd mitigate them, and how they'd report critical incidents, according to state guidance posted by the California Department of Technology.
Why is the state doing this now? And what exactly do they mean by catastrophic risks?
Lawmakers were reacting to mounting warnings that cutting-edge systems could deceive operators or help enable mass harm, even if those scenarios are unlikely. The bill defines catastrophic risks in Business and Professions Code, Section 22,757.11, as foreseeable events where an AI system materially contributes to mass casualties, economic damage above $1 billion, or loss of control that threatens public safety. CalMatters points to a 2023 state-commissioned report co-authored by Stanford's Rishi Bomasani that found most companies weren't reporting incidents, and Stanford's 2025 Transparency Index says disclosure got worse, not better.
So who's actually covered here? Are startups caught up in this?
No, that's very intentional. The Washington Post and CalMatters both noted the bill targets only developers training so-called frontier models at massive compute scales, roughly at or beyond systems like GPT-4, and only if the company earns more than $500 million a year. In plain terms, it's aimed at giants like OpenAI's backers, Google, Meta, and similar players, so smaller labs and academic groups aren't swept in.
You mentioned disaster plans. What do those look like in practice?
There are two main pieces. First, every frontier developer has to publish a transparency report when they release a new model or make big changes, using a state template the California Department of Technology calls Form TR1. According to LAist, those reports must include the release date, what the model does, intended uses, any usage restrictions, and a top-line summary of safety tests, with room to redact trade secrets.
And the second piece? For the biggest companies?
Large frontier developers also have to publish an annual Frontier AI Framework, which is their governance and safety playbook. State guidance says it should explain who has authority to stop a launch, how they protect model weights, what risk assessment methods they use, and which standards like NIST or ISO they follow. The industry fought off mandatory audits, but the law encourages independent third-party reviews, according to CalMatters' bill breakdown.
How does this differ from the earlier bill that failed? Didn't that one demand kill switches?
Exactly. That was Senate Bill 1047 from 2024, which Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed as too prescriptive. That proposal would have required kill switches, pre-training tests, outside audits every year, and even CEO certifications under penalty of perjury for very large training runs, The Verge and CalMatters reported at the time. This new law takes a lighter touch, centered on disclosure rather than control mandates, which supporters say avoids scaring off investment.
If a company finds a serious problem, what happens? How are incidents handled?
There's a reporting regime that gives the law some teeth. Developers have 15 days to notify the state's Office of Emergency Services if they discover a critical safety incident, like a model bypassing guardrails or someone getting unauthorized access to its weights. If there's an imminent threat of death or serious injury, they must alert authorities within 24 hours. And NPR's coverage of the rollout notes, there's a dedicated Cal OES portal to file those reports.
Can the public or employees flag issues too?
Yes, and that's a big shift. The law adds whistleblower protections in the labor code, so employees at places like Google or OpenAI can report serious safety concerns internally or directly to the Attorney General or Cal OES without retaliation. Cal OES also set up an AI incident reporting portal where the public can submit tips, and those submissions are confidential under public records exemptions but will be aggregated in anonymized summaries starting next year.
Confidential how? Are these incidents going to be hidden from everyone?
The reports themselves aren't posted in full, which critics don't love. They're exempted from broad public disclosure, but Cal Matters says the state can share redacted versions with the governor and legislature, and Cal OES must publish annual anonymized trends beginning in 2027, which is 1 year from now. The idea is to protect proprietary details while still surfacing patterns, like repeated attempts to steal model weights or recurring jailbreak techniques.
What happens if a company ignores these rules? Are the penalties meaningful?
The Attorney General can seek civil fines up to $1 million per violation. For a trillion-dollar tech giant, critics told the Future of Privacy Forum that feels like a cost of doing business, especially compared with the European Union's AI Act, which can reach a percentage of global revenue. Rishi Bhamasani told Cal Matters, quote, "The practical impact is heavily shaped by how you implement it, how you enforce it," end quote, underscoring that resources for Cal OES and the Department of Technology will determine whether companies take this seriously.
This sounds focused on doomsday scenarios. What about everyday harms like bias or misinformation?
That's one of the main critiques. Brookings analysts argue the bill's narrow catastrophic lens misses daily harms like discriminatory outputs, disinformation, labor displacement, or the environmental toll of data centers' power and water use. Palo Alto Online's Cal Matters reprint also tied the final compromises to broader tech lobbying wins in December, like softening proposals that would have put stricter limits on new data centers.
Does the law try to address data transparency in any way?
Yes, but through a companion measure. Assembly Bill 2013 also takes effect today and requires all generative AI systems used publicly in California to provide high-level summaries of training data sources, volumes, and whether personal or copyrighted material is included. The state's guidance tells frontier developers to unify that information on the same disclosure page as their safety reports, so users can see both data and risk context in one place.
You mentioned compute thresholds earlier. How does the law decide which models count as frontier?
The statute sets a training compute floor of roughly 10 to the 26th floating point operations, which policy researchers use as a proxy for cutting-edge capability. It's an attempt to keep the net narrow and target systems believed to pose outsized systemic risks. Stanford's Transparency Index found that as models moved into that range, disclosure actually declined, which is part of why lawmakers leaned on a compute-based trigger.
Are there any new state programs baked into this beyond reporting?
There's a public computing initiative tucked in. The law creates Cal Compute inside the Government Operations Agency to provide shared compute resources for research, and it has to deliver a report by January 1st next year, which is exactly 1 year from today. According to Cal Matters, that's meant to blunt criticism that rules only entrenched incumbents with the biggest private clusters.
How are companies reacting? Do they see this as workable?
Compared with last year's failed bill, the big developers appear more willing to live with disclosure, according to LAist's coverage and industry statements. They pushed successfully to remove mandatory audits and personal liability requirements, and they won a high revenue threshold that exempts many venture-backed labs that haven't hit big sales yet. Advocates call that a loophole, but supporters say it keeps innovation from fleeing the state.
Could that revenue threshold create a blind spot?
Transparency advocates warn it already does. The Future of Privacy Forum says you could have a lab valued at $10 billion, training very large models but booking less than $500 million in revenue, and they'd avoid the heaviest obligations. That's why you'll hear the phrase, quote, the billion-dollar startup gap, end quote, in policy circles discussing this bill.
Are other states following California's lead?
New York is already moving. Governor Kathy Hochul signed the Responsible AI Safety and Education Act on December 19th, just under 2 weeks ago, and officials say they plan tweaks this year to mirror California's model while keeping a stricter 72-hour incident reporting window. The Department of Financial Services is standing up an AI oversight office, and early compliance is encouraged even though the transparency pieces phase in by early next year.
Is there any chance the federal government steps in and overrides parts of this?
That's an open question now. A federal executive order signed on December 11th, just 20 days ago, directs agencies to challenge state AI rules that conflict with national policy, raising preemption risks. Legal analysts at Orrick and Skadden told clients to monitor for court tests. For companies, that means coordinating disclosures across jurisdictions and getting advice before deciding whether California's forms can double as federal or New York compliance.
What about accountability if something goes wrong? Can victims sue under this law?
Not really. Unlike the vetoed bill, this one doesn't create new civil liability for harms linked to AI systems. It leans on public disclosure and administrative penalties. Brookings researchers argue that's why it feels more like a disclosure shield than a safety net, though supporters say shining light on risk practices can still change behavior.
Do we have any early signs of how robust the state's enforcement will be?
Funding will drive that more than anything written on paper. Cal OES issued emergency regulations late last year, set up the incident portal, and posted FAQs, which suggests they're gearing up, but the real test will be how they handle the first wave of reports. As Bamasani told CalMatters, enforcement capacity and follow-through will determine whether this is a meaningful guardrail or just a new web page.
For listeners who want to see these disclosures, where do they go?
Companies are supposed to host their transparency reports on their own sites, linked from a single disclosure page, and the state has guidance posted at ai.ca.gov/TFAIA compliance. Cal OES maintains the incident portal at incidentreporting.ai.ca.gov, though that's for reporting, not browsing, since entries aren't public. LAist and Palo Alto Online plan to track which major developers publish on time, so local outlets could become a de facto index.
Bottom line it for us. What's the real-world impact listeners should watch for this week and in the months ahead?
In the short term, expect to see glossy safety pages from the biggest AI names, alongside more structured disclosures about what models do and how they're tested. Over the next year, pay attention to whether Cal OES reports trends in attempted weight theft, jailbreaks, or model-assisted cyberprobes, and whether lawmakers try to expand the law to address daily harms like bias. According to CalMatters, this is a first step meant to build trust without slamming the brakes on innovation, and whether that works will come down to how honestly companies share and how aggressively the state enforces.
And just to clarify the timing, everything you've described is in effect today, January 1st?
Yes, the core disclosure requirements and whistleblower protections take effect today, and developers releasing new or significantly updated models now have to file those transparency reports. The annual anonymized incident summary starts next year, on a calendar the state says will update every January. CalCompute's first report is due 1 year from today, which should give everyone a sense of how accessible public compute could become for researchers.
Chloe, thanks for breaking that down and helping us make sense of it.
Happy to, Grace. It's a complex space, but listeners should know there are new tools for oversight and a clearer window into how these systems are being built. As NPR affiliates like LAist keep pointing out, transparency is not a cure-all, but it's a start in a year when AI will only get more powerful.
Appreciate it, Chloe. We'll keep following the rollout and what it means for users here in California. Here are some other headlines. Just after the ball dropped, New York City flipped the switch. Zohran Mamdani was sworn in as the 112th mayor just after midnight inside the decommissioned Old City Hall subway station, turning a platform into a platform. Administered by Attorney General Letitia James, the 34-year-old Democratic Socialist took his oath on a Quran, becoming the city's first Muslim mayor and first of South Asian descent. Calling the subterranean site a testament to the importance of public transit, he promptly named Mike Flynn as Transportation Commissioner. A public inauguration at 1 p.m. on City Hall Plaza will feature Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Why it matters: City Hall shifts left after Eric Adams, with promises of fare-free buses and a citywide rent freeze. Mamdani, the youngest mayor in generations, aims to tackle affordability while keeping relations on track with business and law enforcement, retaining Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch for stability. In Europe, Bulgaria is cashing in on cohesion. As of today, it's the 21st member of the Eurozone, swapping the lev for the euro at a fixed rate of 1.95583. ECB President Christine Lagarde called the move a powerful symbol of unity, while Bulgarian National Bank Governor Dimitar Roldev takes a seat on the ECB Governing Council. Accounts convert automatically. Cash payments can still be made in leva through January 31st, but change comes in euros. Dual pricing sticks around until August 8, 2026, alongside a year-long watchdogging of essential prices. The payoff: roughly 1 billion leva saved annually on exchange costs, smoother investment flows, and sturdier shelter against geopolitical squalls. Call it lev to heaven for markets. In Iran, a flashpoint amid falling fortunes, officials reported the first fatality among security forces in the largest protests since 2022. A 21-year-old Basij member, Amir Hossam Kodayari Fard, killed in Kudasht, Loristan, with 13 security personnel injured. The unrest ignited in Tehran's Grand Bazaar and has spread to at least 21 provinces, fueled by a collapsing rial, plunging to about $1.4 million per US dollar, and inflation above 50%. President Masoud Pezeshkian recognized legitimate grievances, even as the prosecutor general warned of a decisive response, and authorities declared a cold weather public holiday to cool crowds. From a December 28th market strike to a nationwide chorus in 4 days, the timeline is fast, and the stakes faster. In Switzerland, a resort town's night turned to ash. A massive fire at the La Constellation Bar in Crans, Montana, around 1:30 a.m. left dozens presumed dead, with officials expecting at least 40 fatalities and about 100 injured. Witnesses say a candle or pyrotechnic ignited a wooden ceiling, triggering a deadly flashover and collapse. Hospitals in Sion and Lausanne are at capacity, with burn victims transferred to Geneva and Zurich. A regional state of emergency is in effect. Expect a scorching review of alpine nightlife safety, especially indoor pyrotechnics, before the 2027 Alpine World Ski Championships put the region back in the global spotlight. And the sea holds its breath again. The search for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 has resumed. The vessel Armada 8605 has arrived in a new southern Indian Ocean zone, deploying AUVs diving to 6,000 meters. Ocean Infinity is operating under a renewed no-find, no-fee deal, about $70 million if they locate the wreck. This 55-day push targets 5,800 square miles refined by satellite and drift data after an April weather pause, aiming to finally surface answers before summer's window, and hope closes. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with GPT-5, Gemini Pro 3, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.